to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairperson Mike Seville.
Present.
Vice Chair Bill Donnell.
Here.
Alderman John Lash.
Present.
Alderman Ted Masiacos.
Present.
Alderwoman Wani Garza. Here. 5 present.
Okay, and this is the meeting of the January 23rd, 2024. So first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes 23-1032.
So moved to approve.
Second.
Approval of minutes of the PHST committee held on December 12th, 2023, moved by Alderman Garza, second by Alderman Donnell. Any corrections, additions, or deletions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried, 5-0. Okay, any members of the public wishing to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay, we'll move to the agenda then. 24-002, resolution approving the 2024 Quality of Life grants in the amount of $1,017,000. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alderman. I'm Chris Ragona, Community Development Manager for the City of Aurora. This presentation that'll be taking place today will be for both items, and we'll just jump right into it. We're going to be talking about 3 different processes that we took for 2024, 3 separate funding sources. So we'll talk about the funding overview, eligible activities for each, the process that we took to come up with our recommendations, which started last summer, our recommendations breakdown, as well as currently available funding moving forward. We'll look at some success stories from 2023, as well as our project outlook for 2024. So on the table here, you can see we immediately started our process after HUD approved what was called our needs assessment for our home ARP funds. To give you a little background on what home ARP is, it was approved through the American Rescue Plan as a single-time allocation in the amount of $2.7 million. So it's not like our normal entitlement grants like our CDBG or our regular home program. Once that was approved, we decided we wanted to do a 2-phased application, releasing the application on June 6th. We had 14 submittals, and then we interviewed each of them individually in a mostly Zoom with a few in person, and then we cut that down to 8. As we were going through that process, we wanted to start our community development block grant as well as our quality of life funding process, and we began that in August 11th. We made sure to reach out to as many of our nonprofit partners and interested parties as we could. As we received bounce backs via email, we went through and tried to update as many of the contacts as we could and made phone calls when we had to. The final application for block grant and quality of life was due on September 21st, and then city staff began reviewing all of the applications. And then just a couple of other notes here. Our block grant working committee did review all of these recommendations, and then we'll be seeking city council approval next month. So there's a lot on this slide here, but I think it was important to show sort of the different eligible activities and ways we qualified some of our applications. Since we did have 3 different pots of money going, all with different requirements and restrictions, we tried to slot in our agencies based on what they were applying for each of these different opportunities. So on the left side, we have our community development block grant, which is primarily driven through household income or neighborhood income through census tracts. Key activities include housing, both rental and home buyer, as well as rehab. For infrastructure, we could fund street repairs, new park improvements, sewers, infrastructure, things like that. And for public service, very broad, so things like job training, homelessness prevention, senior assistance, legal services, things like that. And then the last major piece is capital improvements for nonprofit assistance. So major upgrades such as roof replacements, parking lot replacements, things like that. For quality of life, it's much more broad. Quality of life is primarily funded through the city's gaming tax, which comes from our city's casino. The major items include child care, youth programs, job training programs, again, homelessness prevention, assistance to our seniors and those who are disabled, the broad category of downtown improvement, our museums, and we leave it open for other activities considered on a case-by-case basis. Since the city is essentially writing the rules on this, we could be a little bit more broad. And then on the right side, we have our home ARP grant program. Primarily, this is a homelessness prevention program, but it does allow us to do things such as provide emergency rental assistance, the development of rental housing only or preservation, as well as categories of supportive services which are similar to CDBG, which include healthcare, homelessness prevention, assistance for housing search, programs for substance abuse, domestic violence survivors, and legal services. As I mentioned before, unfortunately, we can't use this for home buyer activities.
Chris, what's the source of funding for that grant program?
For which one, Alderman?
The third one, home?
So the home ARP is a federal grant. This is the one that I mentioned that's a single-time allocation. We do receive another grant called just regular home. It's called Home Investment Partnerships Program, and that is an entitlement that the city receives on an annual basis. And we'll touch on that in the next couple of slides.
Okay, thank you.
So looking at our total funding availability pot, we have our 4 different sources here. Just a couple of notes on each. For Community Development Block Grant, our annual allocation is around $1.3 million. As you can see, we did have some surplus funds from projects coming in under budget, projects that needed to be canceled, leftover administration, program income, and things like that. Our annual entitlement is trending down. So a few years ago, we were receiving around $1.5 million. We're now receiving $1.3 million. The cost of doing business is also going up. So as the amount of funds we have is going down and the cost of business is going up, it does crunch in our ability to provide level services.
Based on the recent census?
So the census is a component of determining the entitlement. Certainly the congressional appropriation is the most important piece. CDBG is somewhere around $3 billion total for the entire country. But they do look at total population. They have other, they look at the census through census tracts and the percentage of low-income census tracts. The other thing is, as a population or a town increases over 50,000, they have the right to become their own entitlement. So that continues to split the pie, sliver by sliver. So there are multiple components that go into determining the annual allocation. This next piece here, the Home Investment Partnerships Program at $2.2 million, we receive around $750,000 annually. That number's actually been ticking up a little bit over the last few years or so. What we have done at the city is primarily invested in larger multifamily affordable housing developments. So think of the Lincoln and Todd development. Generally, it takes a few years of us to save the amount of money that we get because after administration and some set-asides that we're required to do by HUD, there's only around $500,000 a year annually that we have to invest in those types of activities. With the Home Investment Partnerships Program, we can invest in home buyer activities such as the development or construction of new housing, as well as down payment assistance. The third piece here, the Home Investment Partnerships Program, American Rescue Plan. This is that one-time allocation, so we won't be getting this moving forward. The expiration on these funds is September 30th, 2030, so we do have quite a bit of time to expend, and we'll be talking a little bit about the recommendations in the next couple of slides. Quality of life is funded primarily through the city's gaming tax that comes from the casino in the amount of $1,017,000. There is a small piece of funding that does come from our SHAPE fund, which is primarily funded through the city's home rule sales tax. So jumping to our CDBG request, we try to utilize a both qualitative and quantitative scoring method. Members from the community development team reviewed each of these applications based on the completeness and quality of the application, their budget, which includes sources and uses, current experience and ability to utilize a federal grant, past performance, the ability to carry on with their program if a reduction of funds was awarded, their performance metrics, duplication of services, their ability to serve Aurorans, the timing of the project, and then collaboration. So as you can see, we had 23 applications, and we were looking to fund 11 projects. We also look from a good standing standpoint. We look to see if they were in good standing with the city, the state, our feds. We reviewed their audits, conducted interviews and site visits when needed to determine that these applicants were capable of carrying out these projects. So a couple key highlights. We have funding for abused children, funding for our Financial Empowerment Center, funding for senior living, including rehab, as well as our domestic violence survivors, job training program, homelessness prevention, our rehab and accessibility improvement program, a little bit more for down payment assistance, and some enhanced street resurfacing. The next pot of funds was our quality of life request. We had 48 total applications, which is about in line of what we received last year. Total request was much higher than our ability to award all of them, so we were recommending 39 total projects funded in the amount of $1,017,000. One of the key factors we looked at and why many applicants were denied was they were applying for a specific event or a fest. That is something that we'll be further enhancing in our application to let applicants know that that's not really the kind of thing that we're looking for in our 2024 quality of life or 2025. Again, we used a qualitative and quantitative method. We looked to place the applications into 4 tiers in order to help go down all the way to the $100 increment when we were putting our final awards together. We looked at completeness, quality, budget, sources and uses, experience, past performance. In most cases, folks received a reduction in funds, so we wanted to make sure they'd be able to move forward with that. Their performance metrics, duplication of services, their ability to serve Aurorans, timing, collaboration, and past performance. Again, we conducted good standing checks with city, state, federal. We conducted our audit reviews. We conducted on-site visits for folks who have not previously applied, and we conducted interviews as well. For home ARP, our application pool was much smaller. However, we emphasized we were really looking for applicants who are currently working with what the feds are calling qualifying populations, those who are either literally homeless or on the verge of homelessness. So we received 14 total applications and are recommending funding for 8. I will note in the housing development category, it says 0. We did decide to move that application to a different source of funding, to our Home Investment Partnerships program. When I mentioned that set aside, 15% of all funds has to go to something called a community housing development organization. The city currently only has 4 of those that meet that special criteria, so $132,000 was moved to that pot of funds. And then under supportive services, we recommended funding for 6. One additional application we were recommended for quality of life programming based on the services they were looking to provide.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The 132,000, what was that for? What housing development project?
So that particular application was for CHAD, and CHAD stands for Community Housing Advocacy and Development. They have been a CHODO of ours since the city started receiving home funding in 2010. So that application in particular would be for the preservation of affordable housing. So we'd be providing funding for rehab of units that they currently have.
Okay. Are you going to go into future slides that lay out where this money is going, similar to how the
So I
other
can
attachment you've provided for the 1 million from riverboat funds?
certainly. I wasn't going to go application by application, but I certainly can do that. In your packets, I did lay out the attachments, which show their funding request, funding they received in 2023, as well as our recommendations for 2024. We also included a paragraph project summary for each application, but we're happy to provide any additional information that you might have on a particular application.
These are for the quality of life grants, though, correct? The attachment in our...
So for there's 2 different items on the agenda. The first is for quality of life. The second one, the one that has 7 or 8 attachments, that is going to include your community development block grant as well as your home ARP and home.
Got it. So this presentation's for both.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so that gets us to home ARP funds recommended in the amount of 1.5 million and some change. So when you put everything together, we received 85 applications, which is the most the city has ever received, at least as far as I'm aware. And we're recommending 59 unique activities for 2025. Our total funds recommended are $4.4 million out of a total ask of $12.5 million. So that's not all. In that $4.4 million recommended, we have funding remaining. In our community development block grant, that amount is around $200,000. We have historically held back some as a contingency, so in case there is a potentially an urgent need or a large change order for a project we're currently funding, the need to increase the funding of an activity that maybe needs additional money, such as our single-family rehab program or ADA accessibility program. We wouldn't get access to this money until about the end of the summer, so by then we'll have a much better idea of if we're going to need to allocate this. Otherwise, this would just roll into the 2025 application round, and that's what we did with our 2023 money. For home investment partnerships, we have $2.2 million still available. Within that includes $300,000 of that CHODO designation that I previously talked about. So we have about 1.9 for the development or preservation of affordable housing, for home buyer or rental activities, and then that $300,000 that has to go to that community housing development organization. So we hope in 2024 we'll have a little bit better idea of what our path is for how we can best allocate these dollars. And then for our home ARP program, we have 1.1 million, 85,000. These dollars don't need to be spent till September 30th, 2030. That doesn't mean we want to wait that long. We spent a lot of time building this program from scratch, drafting agreements, reviewing our policies and procedures, drafting policies and procedures for activities we have not previously completed. So we did want to hold some money back to see how our first batch of activities go. If they're successes, we might add additional dollars. If they don't work out, then we can go a different route. And we can also utilize this money for the development of rental housing or affordable housing. For quality of life, we are allocating 100% of the dollars, so if there are any changes that take place, it would need to come at the loss of another applicant. And that gives us $3.5 million to have on hand in 2024 should the right opportunity come up. So let's move forward to a few success stories and program highlights, as well as programs that are currently available. So our Safety First program is the city's single-family rehab program. We've invested $835,000 since early 2020. One change this year is we have increased the max funding up to $15,000 from $10,000. The program used to be a $10,000 grant with $5,000 being forgiven after 3 years, and the other $5,000 would be deferred. So if you sold the home or it was no longer your primary residence, we would recapture that to then reinvest. After reviewing data with the Neighbor Project, because of inflation and just the cost of doing business, $10,000 doesn't really go that far anymore. We couldn't do a roof anymore. Porches and other projects that we've previously funded all exceeded $10,000. We decided to increase that amount, $7,500 forgiven now after 5 years, and the remaining $7,500 in the form of a deferred loan. Rebuilding Together Aurora, they've been our partner for many years, providing accessibility improvements with $250,000 invested since 2020. This is a straight up $5,000 grant. As you can see, the improvements are not substantial, but they are significant to the household. In the pictures here, we have two examples of bathroom accessibility improvements. We've done some porches and walkways and grab bars and improvements to the kitchen. And for now, the $5,000 grant is holding, but we will be working with our partner in 2024 to see if cost estimates are constantly being exceeded, and we have the ability to then increase that grant. Our down payment assistance program has been in operation for at least the last 5 years or so, with only $127,000 invested since 2020. Our max award is up to $5,000, typically for closing cost assistance. However, with prices up, interest rates up, insurance rates up, it is harder to find qualifying clients who are purchasing what we consider to be affordable housing based on their projected housing payment in order to qualify for this program. So this is another one in 2024 that we, again, want to continue to monitor. If interest rates continue to dip, as they have at least in the last couple of months or so, and the price of a home stabilizes, then we may be able to assist additional clients with this program. So a couple project profiles from 2023. We have DuPage Senior Citizens Council, Meals on Wheels, community diving, drive-through food events, and well-being checks, really just assistance for our seniors. They received $25,000 in quality of life funds. They're also being recommended for an additional $25,000 in 2024. World Relief, Refugee and Immigrant Youth Services. Again, they are a 2024 project recommendation in the amount of $15,500, so a slight increase from 2023. I was able to attend one of their play dates last year, and it was pretty interesting to see people from literally all across the world there speaking their different languages, but all communicating with each other. So I was really proud that I attended that event and was able to speak with some of the folks there. Project profile number 3, Fox Valley Special Recreation Foundation. That's Viviana in the Minnie Mouse costume. They are again recommended for the same amount in 2024. This is for sensory processing disorder and autism, so everyone can be inclusive of all of the events. This particular event was at, I believe, the 100th birthday party for some of our seniors that took place at the Prisco Center. And it's not a large amount, but we think it makes a big difference in some of the folks that are attending our events. Just an update on the Lincoln School. Just give you a little background. 1892, the building was built. We're looking for 36 affordable units to be redeveloped through the existing building as well as the new construction on the right side of the picture. Rent limits are going to range from $400 to $1,300 depending on the bedroom size and household income. And the application for lease-up is currently open. So we're hoping for a winter 2024 opening of the facility. Certainly there were some delays in construction due to supply chain issues, but we're looking for winter 2024 was my last update. To go with that, the Todd School.
Does that mean that we're in the next couple months, because it is winter of 2024? Or
Correct.
Next December?
Mhm.
So in the next couple months?
Correct. It'll depend on final inspections, getting that certificate of authenticity, and then having the tenants go through the application process, which does include an income certification. So some of those things could take longer than others, depending on how the final inspections go. But we are on track, I believe, for the next couple of months.
Thank you.
So for the Todd School, this is part of the same development, different site, smaller site, 11 units to be developed, and it's also going to include a public health facility for District 129 with key items such as preventative subsidized family health care, vaccination, school physicals, things like that. Again, this is, the application is open for leasing. They are conducting targeted marketing in Aurora in high traffic areas. So while we can't mandate that Aurora residents have first come, first serve, the marketing efforts that are being taken are primarily in Aurora. So we're hoping 100% occupancy will come from our Aurora residents. And the VNA clinic we're hoping is going to be opening in the winter 2024 as well. So a couple items to look out for in 2024. Mutual Ground has been one of our highest performing partners over the last several years or so, and we're recommending them today for 2 separate projects in 2 separate funding sources. The first being through Home ARP for assistance in housing search relocation as well as emergency rental assistance. One of the things that we heard over and over in our listening sessions when we were completing our needs assessment was people have the means to be independent, but they can't find the housing, or they're not being selected for the housing, and that just could be because of potentially their source of income, but potentially that they had a domestic situation, prior conviction, prior eviction, things along those lines. Additionally, we are recommending $40,000 for general case management services to provide critical resources. This has been a project that we've funded for the last several years for Mutual Ground, and we'd like to continue to do so in 2024. On the note of emergency rental assistance, this will be set aside specifically for Mutual Ground clients. However, we are recommending additional funding for our general population from another partner, Loaves and Fishes, in the amount of $50,000. And then for Hesed House, we are recommending $480 total $1,000 for 3 different activities. So in speaking with them during our needs assessment and in their application, they're looking to have someone on site as a substance abuse and domestic violence counselor from Mutual Ground. They're on site 40 hours a week. We also heard from them that they have clients who have the means to be self-sufficient and pay for their housing, but because of maybe their past work history or their current state of homelessness, on an application you have to list where is your current residence, potentially a past criminal record, prior evictions, type of income. These are all preventing their lease up, and because of that, they're still at the shelter. So with potentially additional assistance in what can be a cumbersome process of finding an available unit, filling out the application, working with the landlord, trying to tell your story, we're hoping that will clear some of those folks who are ready to transition from the shelter into self-sufficiency. And then item number 3 is general case management, and this is to mitigate and prevent a wide variety of issues that are caused from homelessness. And in looking, Hesed House has been, I'd say, our biggest partner since 2020. $1,060,000, including the amounts recommended for today, have been invested and given directly to Hesed House for a variety of public service activities as well as capital improvements to their buildings. So the next steps, we are at the tail end of our process. We're looking for City Council approval because of the 5th Tuesday on Tuesday, February 13th, 2024. We will then wait until HUD gives us our actual dollars. Right now, we're basing our recommendations off projections, and then we'll be submitting our plan for approval later this winter. We've also been hosting all of our project setup meetings, 50 plus in the last 45 days or so. So when the time comes that everything is approved, we can immediately execute contracts and begin having our partners provide resources. And then in the spring 2024, because we have so many projects, we have so many new projects, new sources of funding, we are going to be doing some on-site monitoring, spot checking some files, making sure that our partners are saying what they're doing is correct, and then for us to make sure that we're providing them with the correct information so they're meeting all of the federal rules. Summer 2024, ideally everyone has executed their contract, and our plan is to immediately begin drafting our 2025 to 2029 5-year consolidated plan. That's something that's mandated by HUD, so we'll be beginning in the summer of 2024 to prepare for the next year. And then the vast majority of our projects will close on December 31st, 2024. However, a few of our home ARP applications will be executing 2-year agreements. So with that, I want to thank everyone and certainly open the door up to additional questions that you may have. If I'm unable to answer them today, I'll be happy to follow up before Committee of the Whole.
All right, thank you, Chris. Any questions from the committee? Alderman Masiacos? Oh. Okay, Alderman Lash?
I do have a few questions on some of the nonprofits that I'm not familiar with, but I wanted to start with just the During the discussion about the Boys and Girls Club, it was said that there would be no city money, yet in these appropriations, we have $750,000 going to the Elgin Boys and Girls Club for the Aurora Clubhouse. Is that for the proposed Garfield Park project?
So you're talking about the Boys and Girls Club Quality of Life grant? So
Sorry, it's $750,000. I'm not sure if it's CDBG. I don't think it's quality of life. Let me look.
Correct. So they applied for $750,000. We are recommending to deny them today.
Okay. And then, is there a plan to fund that elsewhere or no?
At least from the community development standpoint, we are issuing a deniance of community development block grant. From the city's perspective, I would defer to the mayor's office on that.
Okay, cool. I also want to know, I'm just not familiar with them. It's Xylan. This is Xylan and Rita's Ministries, both in the riverboat funds, the gaming, the quality of life grants. What do they do?
So certainly, Sheelan is, they primarily provide services to seniors in Aurora. And that program is open to all qualifying members. They have a satellite campus located in Aurora that we visited multiple times. They do have much larger facilities, with one being located in Naperville, where it's more of like an adult daycare center or so. But they're a pretty established nonprofit agency. Rita's ministry primarily
What do they do for us? Sorry.
What's that?
What do they do for us? You pronounced it Sealand?
Is Sheelan.
Sheelan? Okay.
So they're going to provide a variety of different case managers to our seniors. So our seniors have a variety of different needs, and this helps with the operation costs.
Okay. And then Rita, sorry.
So Rita's Ministries primarily provides services to prisoners re-entering the system. This particular piece of the funding is coming from the SHAPE, not necessarily the quality of life funds. But they have also received funding from us for the last 4 or 5 years or so. So about twice a year, I'll attend a meeting on site at Rita's. And, they offer mentorship. Because some of the people who work at Rita's were prior offenders. They have a very extensive networking base to try and introduce people to help them get jobs, which can be extremely difficult when they're reentering the system, as well as housing as well.
Okay, and where are they? Are they out of Aurora?
They are. They're located on Lake Street. Well, I don't have the exact address, but they are located just north of Lake Street. Well, I'd have to get you the exact address on that.
All right, I'll look it up.
Okay.
568 West Galena.
Oh, there you go.
Alderman Masiacos, did you have a question?
Yes, I know there's a lot of work that goes into this since day one when I came in about a decade ago, and what you all plan and you research and whatnot. My first question is, my understanding last year was that, based on what you also said just now, you're going to go do spot checks, you're going to verify that the money's being used where it's supposed to be used, correct?
Correct.
And does that mean that there's a potentiality of an applicant who's been awarded money that doesn't get the entire allocated amount? So like last year, did everybody get every single dollar that was allocated to them?
Last year, I believe everyone received 100%. Well, all right, if we're talking quality of life, I believe everyone received 100% of their grant. When we look at CDBG and our federal dollars, we have time periods that must be met and expenses must have occurred during those time periods. So from a CDBG standpoint, as I had mentioned, sometimes we do recapture funds because they are not spent or they come under budget. For quality of life, payments are generally distributed in 4 equal quarterly payments. In 2022, there were a few that did not submit those in a timely fashion. We conducted several follow-up attempts.
Okay, all right.
And
You answered it earlier. You answered my question a lot earlier, so it's fine on the QLL.
Okay.
Quality of life, QL. But this is where I'm going at too as well, ultimately. Quality of life grants. I see one baseball or youth organization towards the west of our, or to the far east of our city is getting 10,000, and they get 10,000 every year. And it takes care of kids in Aurora and the Aurora area. It says here in your own docket information. Aurora Boys Baseball and their programs right now is going down. Last year they were allocated 10,000. This year, fair amount less. What has happened from last year to this year that the allocation has dropped so drastically? Right, at least around 50%.
Certainly. So we had some applicants who had slight increases. We had other applicants who had slight decreases. And we had a few applicants who had, I guess you can say, significantly more decreases. And that was caused for a couple of reasons. First, we look at the application. We scored it qualitatively and quantitatively and placed it into those 4 tiers that I had mentioned. We also look at past performance as well as their ability to complete the requirements of the grant. Secondly, we look at the competition that application faced. As you receive quality of life grants over the years and you seek feedback, your application tends to improve, which then potentially boosts your score up and the quality of your application. When we're looking at, $1 million spread over 50 applications, sometimes we have to make those tough decisions, and we really do look at the past performance of an application, especially when it comes to, making reductions. And then we want to award those who are maybe outperforming what they stated they would, and in those instances, we are increasing their grants.
I guess what I'm trying to also get at is, do you also look at how many dollars per young adult is used or utilized between programs? I mean, do you see how many dollars goes to each participant in those programs?
So we do look at the different categories. However, it is hard based on the broadness of those categories and the fact that there are way more applications in some of those categories than others. So if we wanted to try and split those, we're going to put 25% in education and youth, 25% in seniors, 25% in mental health.
How's this? How do you know how many dollars per child is spent for Wheaton Athletics organization, and how much is allocated per child to Aurora Boys Baseball, for example? Is it a smaller program? Is that why, as opposed to a bigger program? Do we have any matrix about how that money how that's spent per child?
Well, we've tried to stay away from the cost per person, since we know that some of our programs require potentially thousands of dollars per person based on the type of activity that's being performed.
Okay.
Whereas some activities like our food pantry, we know that thousands of people are being served. So if we have $20,000, we know the cost per person is significantly less than some of these other activities where they're only serving maybe a dozen, 2 dozen, things like that.
And if I may, Alderman Masiacos, if I may expand on this a little bit. So I think with the number of applications that we get and that they go up, we try to take a very equitable approach to all the programs. And it's largely based, to your case specific that you're asking about, compliance, right? Our team, as you well stated, does a very good job of taking a very comprehensive look at each application, all of the work that goes into it, and then also trying to award new applicants and of similar type programs so that they too can participate. Some of our awards went down because it was compliance-based, because they did not submit quarterly. Either they didn't get the money that they were supposed to submit and all of the documentation that's needed. And so I think that goes more toward your specific baseball organization question, because that's also a conversation that you had with my predecessor when you raised that concern. And so really it's compliance-based, and we definitely try to help the organizations be compliant.
The concern with your predecessor was the same concern that was a few years ago, and that's making sure that, we continue providing courtesy and helping them out with filling out the applications. This question, I was just about how we make sure that our money is working predominantly for Aurora youth. And because of that comment or that statement in the docket that Wheaton Athletics is about Aurora and around the Aurora area. So making sure that our money works for our students first, or our kids first, and not secondarily, especially when Aurora boys baseball is getting a smaller allocated amount compared to last year as well. And that's the thing I don't understand. You know, so right now, the only thing that I hear is it's a compliance issue by the organization and why they're not being allocated more money based on past performance of not providing that documentation. Am I wrong on that, or did I hear that correctly?
Well, so when we look at every application, there's reasons why we may fund them at a certain amount or lower or potentially deny them. Many of the applications that were completely recommended for denial were based on potentially their past performance or the quality of their application. In this instance, for boys baseball, it resulted in a reduction.
So it's just based on 4 categories, there's no specific data for why, or? So it's just compliance. That's the only thing you've told me so far, is the compliance.
I would say that's a component of our review. So we do have specific review criteria that we take a look at. Like I mentioned, there's the qualitative piece. We have a scoring piece that's broken up into 4 separate tiers. Once we have our basis, we begin putting our recommendations in by looking at the total amount of applicants, what they applied for, what they received last year, as well as their past performance over the last several years. So some received additional funding because of all of these components, because they scored higher, because of their past performance, because of the interview that was conducted. Some received level funding because of the score that they received, because of their past performance. And then there were others that had reductions based on the quality of their application compared to everybody else, based on their past performance, based on a review, did they follow directions with attachments, based on their percentage of Aurora clients served versus non-Aurora clients, based on the total budget of the program versus what they were receiving. So, to provide a specific answer, every application was a little bit different on how we ended up with our total recommendations.
Okay, didn't answer my question, but okay. I mean, there's no matrix at this point, and how we make sure that how we equitably look at dollar for dollar between kids in Aurora and kids out of Aurora being served by this quality of life dollars and quality of life grants.
If you're asking for a specific matrix, our scoring criteria when we go through has scoring ranges for each of the questions that we go through. So depending on how
Do you mind
we
sharing that with us after, outside this meeting?
We can take a look at that. One of the reasons that we don't necessarily want to release the scores is because they are very subjective. That is something that I can discuss, with the mayor's office and our review team. But we have run into issues where in the past where, not at the city, but at a primary or a former employer, when we would release the scores, we would get nitpicked to death because, the difference between scoring a 10 and a 9 on a subjective question could make a difference when it comes to recommendations. And like I said, the scoring piece was only one component.
Alderman Masiacos, so may I reframe your question and just to make sure we understand? At the heart of your question, it's what are we doing to make sure that there's an equitable distribution that takes into account Aurora children served versus non-Aurorans? Was that at the heart of why you're asking and what you're asking?
Even if I was, I think at this point, there's no way of quantifying it because, again, the word subjective was used. So there's not much more to say, I would say, at this point. So I just want to make sure that our kids are being served first and foremost, and that's the main outlook. I guess maybe subjectivity is provided from your staff. At this point, I can only take your word for it. There's nothing I can grab a piece of paper and read to understand that, to verify that, except to just take your word for it if that's the case.
Well, and thank you for sharing your insight and concern. That's definitely something that we will dialogue regarding and go back and look to see if it's something that we can address more clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Denell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my comments, I just want to make sure, they're no response to Alderman Masiako's questions. But first, I want to say I appreciate your presentation today, talking about the source of funding. I might recommend that you put that in your report, that this is casino, gaming money here, this is federal money here. Those are the kind of questions as aldermen we get sometimes. Where's all this money come from? And folks assume it's coming from out of their property taxes. So that's a good thing to have, kind of really, I know you got a lot of, pins of where the source of the money is, but I talked to your associate today and we determined it was casino funds. So that, if you could help me with that. The other thing is, great job. This has got to be a Herculean kind of job that you do. And I read through both, the awards and then the justification. And somewhere in there, it seems like there's going to be a handbook on how we take care of kids, seniors, and homeless in town, and folks looking for a place to live. So I don't know whether we can, I could print that off, but it's good information and stuff I want to have a little more on the front of my mind. The last thing I want to talk about is the only project that actually you gave more money to than they asked for is Jennings Terrace. And Jennings Terrace is a beautiful kind of older retirement home. It's actually in Wani's ward on a beautiful site. And I know that they have needs. Last year, I think we gave them money for paving. Looks like we're going to help them with electric. I think that's a great investment because that's a place, affordable place where people can stay as they age. And I appreciate you doing that.
Certainly, and I'll have to go back and double check, all the attachments and everything. I believe we did give them what they asked for, so I think they asked for 312, and we're recommending 312. If it's not saying that,
100.
okay, then 100 is what we gave them in 2023. So that's probably.
Oh, okay. You're right. This was their request. So you gave them what they requested, but it was substantially more than the year before. But
correct.
Again, I've toured this facility and they need help, and that's great.
And that'll be for much needed electrical upgrades, which will help with AC and a variety of other longer term improvements that they'll be looking for.
Right. Thank you.
Alderman Loesch.
Just a few follow-up questions. I did hear you say that the home money, which I think is what, 2.7 million, has to be spent by 2030, correct?
So the home ARP money has to be spent by 2030.
Okay. And we're proving 1.5 million. And I think to Alderman Donnell's comments, I sat through all of those public meetings. You've done a good job matching up what the needs and concerns of the community were expressing at that time in the organizations. I'm curious how the rest will be spent. And the one thing that was sort of emphasized was that need for transitional housing between Hesed House and the $1,400 a month rent. I'm wondering if our plans for the other portion of that, the 1.2 million, will go in that direction. I mean, I see that we didn't fund AID's housing project. We gave mutual aid mutual ground, or we didn't put any towards Habitat, who both I think were weighing in about the need for brick and mortar space. I'm just curious what the plan is for that.
So for the remainder of the home ARP funding, which is around $1.1 million, we are leaving that open-ended. That could go towards, like you mentioned, development of affordable housing. It could go to additional supportive services. It could go to something that we didn't previously fund, tenant-based rental assistance. But right now, we want to get these first 7 activities up and running. We want to see how they perform. We want to see how our partners perform. And we didn't want to allocate 100% because we wanted to leave some behind for when the right opportunity comes, for when, the real success story of maybe one of these 7 activities, if it performs well. We did deny a few housing applications. It wasn't necessarily the quality of the application, but it was the timing and the other sources of funds that were going into those developments. So I have followed up, and we've had meetings with AID, the Neighbor Project, and Hesed House regarding that particular application. And that's not to say we wouldn't consider a similar proposal once it's been a little further baked. It was more of an idea rather than an application.
Okay, and then just to follow up on what is the street resurfacing? How does that fall into your community services budget? I'm just curious.
So street resurfacing, it accomplishes two things. One, it is not supplanting any city funds. So whatever our street resurfacing budget is, we are going on top of that. And 100% of that money needs to be invested into qualifying census tracts. So those that are having low to moderate income households greater than 51%. That also helps us with the city's timeliness. So some of these programs, as we know, can take a long time as we're drafting the plans, we're securing funds, we're going out to bid. The street resurfacing helps us spend quickly to keep us below what is called our 1.5 timeliness threshold. And we've funded the city street resurfacing program for the last 5 or 6 years or so. So, an additional potentially $3 million in additional street resurfacing got completed on top of what we would normally do.
And then what area is this money going to cover? What ward, what?
So we're working with engineering right now on trying to find those eligible streets in the eligible census tracts for the streets that need resurfacing. So those that are qualified as, poor or below or in need of resurfacing. So we don't have that information just yet, but we'll be working with engineering. They usually take that out to bid either middle to late February to have a contract signed to get the early bird prices in March.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Thanks. Chris, I just have maybe a question or two. Thank you for your report. It's very thorough. I just saw that the Fox Valley Music Foundation received about $12,000 last year, and they requested $44,000 for a festival. And I think I heard you say we don't really fund festivals. They were looking for like a jazz fest. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we did award them with 2023 funding based on the delivery of their 2023 activity and what they were asking for in 2024. We decided to not recommend funding for 2024.
And then I think I heard you say that when you deny an application, you go back to them and say, this is what city staff or the committee would recommend going forward, to keep that in mind of your next and future applications. Is that what you do? Kind of counsel them?
Well, we offer the opportunity. Some will reach out to us and have questions on how to improve their application, ask why they were potentially denied, or maybe why they received a reduction in funding. Those who ask what they got, what they wanted, we generally don't hear from them except for delivering the grant. Some applicants choose to take us up that opportunity, and others don't. And
so if they don't ask, then you don't say?
Correct. We offer our contact information to set up a meeting, answer any questions, and if they choose not to follow up with us on that or take advantage of that opportunity, we will not reach out to them again.
Okay. Because I noticed that you had a couple of first-time applications at Collier Center and Echo Development, and this was the first time that they had applied for anything and they were denied. Did they reach out to you to understand better the process and what might be anticipated to be more acceptable in the future?
With Collier Community Center, we definitely spoke to them multiple times. I'd have to go back in our log and see who else reached out to us.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. If you could let me know whether Echo Development reached out to you or not.
Which one was it?
Echo Development.
I also spoke to the woman who runs Echo as well.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Quick question.
Yes,
Is it
Alderman Lynch.
possible to get this presentation added to the agenda item before it moves to Cal?
Certainly. I'm going to add Alderman Donnell's comments. We're going to enhance it just a little bit, provide a little bit more information, but certainly we'll attach it to the committee of the whole packet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the committee?
Make a motion to,
Is there a second?
I was going to find the agenda number, sorry.
Okay, 24-0002. Motion been made and seconded for approval. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. And let me just read the other one, since I haven't done that yet, for the record. 24-0003, a resolution authorizing approval of 2024 annual action plan and annual action plan substantial amendment 2023, number 3, funding recommendations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Lesh. Is there a
Second.
second? Second by Alderman Donnell. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried, 5-0. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other business to come before the PHS&T? If not, a motion for adjournment is in order.
Alderman Seville, if I can just interrupt,
Lydia?
Alderman Guarza was not present for both of those items, so it would be 4.
Oh, 4-0, sorry. Yeah.
Correct.
I knew that. Thank you. 4-0.
Motion
I
to
stand
adjourn.
corrected. Been moved by Alderman Lesh. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Mesiacos. Alderman Garza is in the room. All in favor, say aye for adjournment.
Aye.
I oppose. Motion carried 5-0 this time. Thank you.